Why hello. So by the title of this video, you can tell that I have finished The Cruel Prince finally after 4 months of reading it. And by that time frame of me finishing this book, you can guess already some of my thoughts on this book itself. Also, just to get this out of the way, so I'm currently sick, so if my voice sounds weird or if I'm just coughing throughout this video, I apologize. My face also might be looking a little blotchy. But yeah. Is it because I've been overworking myself with school, filming, editing, reading, and drawing? Most definitely. So originally, I was doing research for my own novel that's about fairies, and I was on Pinterest and I was looking up like images and stuff, and I happened upon some really pretty art of some characters, and one of the characters was a fairy, and I was like, ooh, this is really cool. And I looked to see like what it was from, because it seemed like it was very specific to certain characters, and so it was from The Cruel Prince, and so I was like, oh, maybe I should read The Cruel Prince, because I didn't realize that that was what this book series was about. And so at my work, at Barnes & Noble, I go and pick out the book. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna read this when I get home. But then, so one of my coworkers, my manager actually, tells me, Sydney, just to let you know, I had a friend who tried to read that book and she said that it wasn't the best and she couldn't continue it and she skipped to the very end and she was kind of underwhelmed of the ending. And so like, you know, just a precautionary, you know, just telling you, just letting you know. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm still gonna read it just because like the plot seems interesting to me and like I might not have the same taste as this person who read it. And so I still decided to buy it. This is a 4-star book on Goodreads. There were like, I looked through the reviews and there were some people that gave it really bad reviews, but the majority of it was a 4-star review. Oh man, this is gonna be a long video. So I got my review notes here. Yeah, it's 14 pages. I was very thorough with my review. There were a lot of things that I did not like about this book, just like putting that out there. But I wanted to say that I am not attributing this to the author herself. This is purely based on what is inside of this book. So basically, I'm oh god, it's starting. So I'm going to be breaking up this review into 3 parts. So I'm going to start with characters, and then I'm going to go into plot and exposition, and then finally writing. Before I dive in, this is going to have a lot of spoilers in it, just FYI, so like honestly, I don't think that you guys should read this book. Like, I struggled getting through it. And honestly, the only reason that I kept reading was because I wanted to make this review. Basically, it follows the story of this girl named Jude, and her 2 sisters are basically kidnapped into this fairy world. And then it fast forwards to like, I don't know how many years later, but the main characters are like 16, 17 around. And so she hates living there even though she like wants to be accepted by the fairies, and humans are seen as very low specimen, like, you know, they don't care about them, they're their servants. But because the main characters are the children, I guess, of this general named Maddox, they are kind of, you know, higher up on the scale, even though they're lowly humans. It basically follows the adventures of this girl named Jude, and she gets some hazing from these fairy people at her school. And there's like a new king that's gonna come to power, and like, I don't even know. I'll get into the rest of it. So I felt like reading this book, none of the characters felt like actual characters to me. They were kind of like caricatures of like, you know, the personality traits that they were supposed to have, and just even the personality traits that they did have were kind of bland in general, and all of the characters I feel like acted the same, and there wasn't like any depth to them at all. And when the author was trying to give them some depth, it just like completely changed who they were as a character and kind of like messed up all of their character development in the process. So basically, like, I found all of these characters' motives to be unimportant and random, and just like, I don't know, just like it was all over the place. Also, something that I realized throughout reading this book is that the more important the character is, the more normal their name is. Like, the most like irrelevant character is named something super, oh my god, I just spit, I'm sorry. But The most irrelevant character's name is like something so exotic and so, I don't even know, like you're never gonna remember their name ever again, like if they say it once. And that's all that they do say, like these irrelevant characters. They only mention them once. And it's like, okay, I don't even know why you mentioned them in the first place. So we have the main character, Jude. She is considered like a fighter. Sorry if I'm like looking down, I'm just like, you know, looking at my notes right here. So Jude is basically like a soldier in training. She wants to be a soldier, but her dad won't let her. But she keeps like wanting to prove that she can fight. But I think it's because like she's a human that like, you know, there's no possibility of her going to become like a soldier in their army. She is very stubborn. She wants to belong in fairy, even though she has like a lot of resentment throughout, especially towards her dad, you know, because he like killed her parents and then took her away from the human world. And so Jude's love interest, come on down, it's Carden, Prince of Fairy. She hates him. He is the cruel prince of the story. And so like she kind of eventually has a thing with him, and that is just kind of like out of nowhere. Like you know from the beginning that it's gonna happen, but the events and motives of people throughout it should not lead to a romance. And I'll get into that a little more when I talk about Carden. It's very hard to tell who Jude is. Like I said before, along with all of the other characters, she is very hard to read, and she's always contradicting herself, and like all I can get from her is that she's like this stubborn, stereotypical young adult book heroine. And honestly, like most of the time she rants about her sisters and other people more than herself. She's not my favorite. She is like my least favorite character in this book. And then we have Carden, Prince Carden. Like, first of all, that name, that is not like a fairy name. It rhymes with Harden. Harden? Is that his name? From After? I don't even know. You know, that new one that everybody's talking about that's being made into a movie? Yeah. So he is the youngest prince of fairy, and he is the cruel prince. You know, he has potential to be a good character. I feel like he has the most potential out of everybody in this book, but like the way it's written and his character development. He can also be considered selfish and doesn't really care about anything, and honestly, like it's really hard to know his character because you barely see him in the beginning. The beginning Carden is very different from the end Carden. So like he literally punches a fairy and rips off his wings. And this is on page 22. One of the plot lines early on in this book is that like Carden for some reason just really wants to mess up Jude and her sister Taryn. And literally at one point he tries to like drown and also feed Jude and her sister to like a nymph. We see this part of Carden, and then he's barely in it for like over half of the book. And then at the very end we get lines like, Carden says, "I'm nervous. I smile a lot when I'm nervous. I can't help it." For the title to be called The Cruel Prince, and to him in the very beginning being portrayed as this person who like basically tortures people and even fairies and rips off their wings, and like the fairy has to be carried away because he like crumpled to the floor. Like I don't see how this adds up. There's nothing really that happens to make him change this way. So first, he does not smile hardly at all in all that we have like seen of him, or I guess read of him. Partly because he's like not really in it that much. So there's no prior example of this like, I smile when I'm nervous thing. This is not because of character development. You might be thinking like, well maybe something happened where like he went through this change that like made him a better character, and you know like it's okay for characters to have flaws and like to show weakness, and he might just be putting up a front in the beginning. Yeah, but you just don't see it. Like, oh my god, like this frustrated me so much. Another thing that Carden says at the end, he's like, "I never wanted you dead. I never wanted anyone dead." Rips off fairy wings, tries to drown and kill you in the lake, lets his friend try to kill you numerous times. Dobby never intended to kill, only to maim or seriously injure. So like, there's this random dude named the Roach, which I will get into that also. So basically there's one plot line. There are these three characters that are basically the spies of one of the princes, and one of them's named the Roach. They all have like these weird code names which like doesn't match the fairiness of the book in any way. So like at the end, Cardan's like, I want the roach to teach me how to steal. And his reasoning is because he thinks it will be useful and he likes him. Like, this is not the same character that we read in the beginning. There is one part that I actually enjoyed reading about Cardan. There's this part where Jude is like pretending to be a servant in like one of the, you know, the mansions or whatever. And she somehow like sneaks her way into like this library because she's trying to find dirt on one of the princes. And then she hears voices and she hides. And Cardan and his older brother, Pelican, I don't know how to pronounce his name. But so they come in and basically like Pelican ends up having a human servant whip Cardan, I believe. I think it's like whipping or whatever. But like it kind of like lets us in on how Cardan's life outside of the schooling is, and we get to see kind of like why he is the way he is. But this is like the only thing that we know about him that's like kind of below service level. So we have Maddock. So he is a soldier and the general for the Fairy King. So again, I have no sense who he is. Even from the beginning, in the prologue, he shows up and he's like this very stoic and like no emotion figure. Oh, sorry. And then, so like he murders the parents, right? And then afterwards he's like, what have I done? It's mentioned that he feels sorrow maybe. Is his impulse control just like not good because he just like murdered two people, one of them being like somebody that he loved, I guess? He's also a very bland character, teaches Jude how to fight, even though we don't really like get any scenes of that. We just basically get like summarized versions of that. And he basically doesn't really interact with like anybody else in the household, just Jude. And so keep in mind there's Jude, Taryn, her sister, her twin, and Vivi, who's the older sister, and there's the wife of Maddock, and there's like her son. So like all these people, and really like the only interaction we see with Maddock is with Jude. Next we have Taryn, who is Jude's twin. And you might be wondering, you know, if you're gonna have like a sibling that's a twin, you might want to like have a reason for them to be a twin, you know? I'm guessing that it's gonna have something to do with the plot line. Before I answer this question, I'm just gonna let it sit there for a while because it's gonna be brought up in a little bit. So she desperately wants to be accepted by the fairy world, but in a very different way from Jude. Jude wants to fight the man but still be a part of it, and Taryn just really wants to be a part of it. And she like wants to find love and wants to marry and be like high in society, and she just wants to like lie low and just like, you know, live her life. I feel like the only reason that Taryn was a part of this book, why she exists, apart from being Jude's twin, is to drive Jude's plot forward. Basically, the whole novel is Jude kind of like trying to protect Taryn from all the hazing that's going on. So that's why she takes like the blunt of it. Brunt or blunt? I don't know. So we have Vivi, the eldest sister. She is half fairy. And she has a human girlfriend, which is like kind of thrown in there. Like, I'm all about diversity, but randomly Jude finds a photo in her room of like her with her arm around this human girl, and they're like in a photo booth, and like from this one photo she's just like, oh yeah, that's her lover, that's her girlfriend. And again, basically she only exists to drive the plot forward. I don't even know. Jude kind of goes to her for advice here and there, but like it's honestly just a filler plot line, like to have Vivi there. Like literally the only reason why she exists is to have the entire beginning happen. Maddock wouldn't have come to find his ex-wife if it weren't for Vivi. Okay, very important. And then we have Oriana, who is the stepmother and also the mother of her child Oak. She doesn't like Jude, same. She actually did have potential. I feel like she had more screen time than Cardan, and that's not good. And so we have Oak, who is the son of Oriana. He is a fairy. He's like a child. I think he's only like 7. And basically he's the heir to the throne. He doesn't get a lot of screen time, like hardly any. It's just like in passing that we hear about him. And then we have Locke, who is Jude's love interest. So Locke is just kind of there too, like everybody in this book. In the beginning, Jude is like in this mock battle with like the rest of the people that she goes to school with for some reason. After the fight, Locke, who is friends with Cardan and who is friends with the other mean fairies who haze Jude and her sister, so he's the most tolerable one. He's the one that doesn't cause any problems. He kind of becomes important later to a side plot, which is like not even important though. He's bland. The only thing that we like get described about him every single time are his fox eyes. Next, we have Prince Dane and Prince Pelican. So they're both princes of fairy. There's like 20 sons, and so these are like the most important ones though, aside from Cardan. So Dane is the more quieter, scary brother, and Pelican is like the louder, more intimidating brother. You don't know much about them besides these traits. Like I said, it's very surface level. There's no character depth. You just have scenes where Pelican's like, I'm badass and I should have the throne, and then Dane's like, but I want the throne and I'm gonna sneak my way into the throne. So now that you know a little bit about the characters, so let's get into the plot and exposition. Throughout the book, there's just pages of exposition, especially in the beginning, that just has like dialogue thrown in there just to like make it seem like stuff's happening, to the point where like you forget what scene is actually taking place. And multiple times I have like had to reread the line before it because there's been like paragraphs in between the two that are like not even like related to what they're talking about. And so, like I said, this happens a lot in the beginning, and like I understand that you need to set up the world, but it's not like too different from the normal world that you need to like spend that much time on it. 80% of this book is filler. Like, I'm not even joking. Every person that we meet, you get way too much information about them. You get a paragraph when every person is introduced. Even if there's some like servant, you get an introduction of their name and like what they're wearing and something that they've done in the past. It just makes me forget everything that happened. It also makes me lose track of how it's gonna apply to something later on. All of this information is fed to me all at once. Okay, it's completely out the window the next, and then like way later in the book, because everything else is just filler, it doesn't become important until the very end. Every single time. Every single time a character enters a scene, or they're not even in a scene, they're just being talked about. There's like a detailed description of who they are and like what they're wearing. With an example of introducing an imp maid at the start of chapter 1. It starts out with this random maid, like at the beginning of chapter 1. There's one sentence setting the scene, and then the next paragraph is introducing this random maid who's in the household of Jude and who's like helping her get ready. And like I already know more about this random maid who I don't even remember the name of, even though they actually say her name like so many times throughout the book, but I don't know anything about Jude. And also because they're being mentioned a lot, you would think that like they have some kind of connection to like the plot later on. No. So like that was just one instance where it happened. And then there's another chapter like starting out naming this random fairy named Bramblewelf. See, I told you, the more important somebody's name is, the more normalized it is, but if they're super irrelevant, it's something like Bramblewelf. Oh no. Okay, I have been doing good with catching when the camera's gonna shut off. It's usually like after 11 minutes because that's just what DSLRs do. But I had the timing off slightly, and so I don't know where I left off. Really, the only reason that this fight scene exists is to just show that like Jude wants to be a soldier and she like defies Maddox's wishes, and then also it sets up the plot line of Locke being interested in Jude, and that's it. The reason why I say this is because like there's no substance to it. Like if there was a reason for it, there would be description of this battle, but no, it's just summarized. To me, it just seems like lazy writing. I swear, as I was reading it and taking my notes, I felt like I was doing editor notes. I should not feel like that when I'm annotating a book. There's like this weird love-hate relationship with Maddox. There's random exposition in the very beginning when Maddox isn't even there. So like I said before, Maddox murdered Jude's parents when she was very young and stole them away, and Now she's like living in his house. This was one of the many problems. We get this prologue about Maddox. He kills the parents and then he steals the girls away. Not a page later does Jude say, "But I came to love him as a father." And we get info dumps about Maddox and how he taught her how to fight and played games with her, and now you love him like a father even though he murdered your parents. Nice. It's not entirely like improbable. One of my other coworkers who did read this book and enjoyed it, she was like, yeah, but it's kind of like she resents him and it's like that Stockholm Syndrome thing. Even that doesn't go in depth at all. Every single time that there's like a problem with Maddox, Jude is like, you know, yeah, I resent him. Yeah, he did these bad things, but like, I love him as a father. He is still my father. And there's no reason behind it. She tells us that she loves him, but not why. You can say like, because he played games with her, because he raised her. That is not enough. Because even that is summarized and you don't get any like, you have no attachment to it. Especially when it happens like a page later on like the 3rd page in the entire book. And so it just makes it very hard to catch your breath when you go from like the prologue, which is like only 3 pages, and then 2 pages into chapter 1, and this happens. After that, we basically get an intro to the fairy world. I feel like a lot of just like introducing the fairy world took up a lot of the book. The crew are about to go to this fairy revel at the fairy court. So when they get there, there's 3 paragraphs in a row that begin with Prince Pelican, Princess Elowen, Prince Dane. Like, paragraph after paragraph. It's just info dumps of the 3 princes and princesses that are just like there. It would have been a lot more natural if we were introduced to these characters as time progressed and when they became important to the story, and instead of like just naming them all at the beginning, because again, it's just hard to catch up and to fit all of this information in your head. After this scene, Jude and her sisters go to the human world, and they kind of say like they sometimes sneak off into the normal world and stuff to buy things that they like. The scene that we get when they go into the human realm, Jude's internal monologue is talking about tampons randomly, and I am not even kidding. I was dying when I read this. This is an actual line. This is like a paragraph. She says, "Before we leave, we stop by CVS and I pick up tampons. I know what you're wondering. No, fairies don't bleed once a month. Yes, they do bleed. Annually. Sometimes less frequently than that. Yes, they have solutions. And yes, those solutions suck."
Oh, no, 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 no.
Why? Oh my god, like I didn't need to know that. It has nothing to do with the plot. Like, you're just trying to, I don't know, like I don't know what that's trying to do. Why is that scene in there? I find it so funny. Like, yeah, that random scene, you might be asking like, you know, what does it do for the plot? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't. Because next, we have Jude and Taryn at school. For some reason, they randomly are schooled with like the gentry, like the other royal fairies, but they're humans. So like, is the only reason why that they're schooled with them is because of Maddox's position, because he's the general to the king? Who would allow them to go to school there since the fairies hate humans? Like, why would they allow that to happen? And it's not like Maddox like really loves them, you know, like. And then there's this scene. I hate this scene, but I love this scene because it actually happens. There's this scene where Carden is walking by. Jude and Taryn are sitting on the grass. You might be wondering why I'm mentioning grass, right? Like, it's pretty clear that they're like sitting in the grass. Carden walks by and Jude has her food up to her mouth. Her mouth is open like this, and Carden kicks dirt up onto the food that's about to go into her mouth. First of all, you're on grass, first of all. Second, how do you kick the dirt? Like, do you like really dig in there to like get it on top of your foot and then hike up your foot like 3 feet in the air? That food is already up to her mouth and she's sitting crisscross like on the grass, and that's like give or take 3 feet. What is this imagery? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. So when the hazing starts happening to both Jude and Taryn, Jude is like, no, I want her to stay out of this. I will like make a deal with you to Carden and like the friends. She's like, leave Taryn out of this and like Taryn won't be able to help me in any of it and stuff. And they're like, you know what? Okay. We have this continual replaying like the same plot line over and over. We just get multiple days of Jude being hazed by these fairies at school, and Taryn's like off to the side and she's like, Jude, you need to stop. You need to stay out of their way. If you continue to do this, you're gonna kill yourself. And Jude's like, if I want to be one of them, I need to be worse than them. So I'm gonna like keep doing what I'm doing. There's this one scene which I actually think it could have been a great scene. Actually, it was a great scene. I remember reading it and I was like, this is actually really cool, because this is like one of the only times that we see into Jude's thoughts and like how she reacts to something. And so this scene is when one of the friends in the friend group, his name Valerian, he basically feeds Jude this fairy apple, this golden fairy apple, which all of like the fairy food basically can make humans see things or poison them or something. And so basically like he force feeds her this apple, and it starts to make her prone to suggestion and becomes really like silly and kind of like loopy and stuff. This scene was just really interesting and it felt like it flowed very easily, and it was a lot different from the rest of the book entirely. After this happens, Locke, who was kind of just there, he didn't really do anything even though he established this kind of like connection with Jude. Eventually, when everybody's had their fun, he's like, okay, stop it, you guys. Like, you know, I'm gonna take her home. And so like at this point, I was like, okay, something's up. He's acting like too perfect. Locke has this party at his house and in this hedge maze, and it literally like took up 3 pages and that was it. At the hedge maze party, so she sees Carden and he's laying about, multiple girls laying around him, and they're all like kissing him and touching him and stuff, and he's just like staring at Jude while they do it, and it's just so creepy. And then Jude is like, you know what, I'm gonna make out with Locke to like even out the playing field. Another plotline that's happening is a new king is coming to power, so like the old king just randomly is like, I'm dying, somebody take over. And so he's like basically gonna choose one of his sons to become king. So we know it's not gonna be Carden, but you know it's gonna be Carden. Basically everybody is like, Dane is gonna be the king, Prince Dane. So this is when Prince Dane propositions Jude with the idea of like becoming his spy. And basically he wants her to go as a spy into this like other court where Prince Pelican lives, and to like pose as a servant and just like find dirt on him. Prince Dane has Jude join his court of shadows. You might think like, wow, what is this? Intrigue. It sounds interesting. Basically, Prince Dane has 3 spies. Only 3. Like not a whole like, you know, network of spies. He only has 3 people spying for him, and they each have code names. And right here is when I was like, yeah, I don't know if I could finish this book. There's one that's called the Roach, there's one that's called the Ghost, and then there's one that's called the Bomb. Do fairies know that terminology? There's this line from the Bomb, and she's like, you'll know you're one of us when you get your name. Oh my god, cringe. There's the scene where Jude spies on Carden and Pelican dueling in a library. That was when she like was trying to find dirt on him, and so she hid in a library, and then randomly after Carden is whipped by his brother and we see some character depth, they just start dueling in a library. Is there enough room? There's also the plot line of Locke's mother being poisoned, so like Jude finds that note in Prince Pelican's rooms or whatever, talking about poison and like talking about a queen. Like there's multiple queens, I don't understand this. It leads Jude to believe that like they were planning on poisoning Dane with this blusher mushroom. That's a tongue twister. So going back to Locke and like his mother being dead, somehow she connects it to her, Oak, the child who's barely been in it this whole time, only to be talked about when he's not in the room. He's the heir. And that's supposed to be like the big reveal, like, ooh, sets forward the plot, but it's not even that big, and it's like confusing because it's like, how did we get here? Basically, she finds out that Locke's mother had a fling with Dane, the prince. There's this like stupid line of, I hope I find something to do with Locke's mother or Dane or the coronation, something I overlooked. Like, you don't need to make a little summary of like what you need to do, like little checkpoints of what you need to do. Pray for me. There's like a random plot line where Jude saves a human girl from being a servant. So like all of the human servants in this land are basically like glamored to be like zombies who just help. And this plot line, again, is pointless. This girl, like, comes out of her daze and she's like, oh my god, like, oh, I can't handle this. Like, I would rather die than accept this. But then Jude's like, no, we're gonna get you back to the human world. You'll be safe soon. And then she gets, like, her sister Vivi, who, again, only exists for, like, 2 plot lines. They get on these random creatures and they're, like, over this lake. So, like, this shocked me. So, like, the girl randomly lets go of the sister and like plummets to her death when they're over this lake. But then, true to this book in form, it's just summarized really quickly, like half a page, that she does this. And that ends the chapter, just like her falling to her death. And then the next chapter begins with just a glossed over, like summarized version of what happened. And you just see that Jude's like sad about it, and that's it. Next, Jude starts to poison herself in order to become immune to like fairy food and stuff. It's a good plot line, I would say. It has potential, but not executed well at all. Jude says that she has researched different kinds of poisons during her schooling. But again, this is in summary form instead of like having a good scene of Jude actually like looking into the books and be like, oh, you know, like this is how I can become immune and like this is what that poison does and this one's different and stuff. Again, just like in summary, and it's not good. Instead of like having a good scene where this happens, we get after this scene of summary, a summary of her boring day at school. It could have been interesting to see her like try to be poisoned with another fairy apple in a different scene by the fairies and her like be immune to it and then be like, what? But no, that didn't happen. I'm like dying right now. I have to sneeze at my eye edges and I'm just like really suffering. Let's play a game. Am I suffering from my sickness or from reviewing this book? You decide. You know, you would think like when she is poisoning herself, how does she feel about this? Like, what is her feeling? What are her thoughts? Like, how is her body dealing with this? The only thing that we get is literally, this is word for word. I am not summarizing this. This is literally the sentence. She retched and was shivering and sweating. That's it. This leads up to the first coronation. The first, because you'll see why. Jude asks Maddox about her parents randomly before they actually go to the court. And so like randomly Maddox just reminiscing about the wife that he killed and the dude that she left him for that she also killed. There's just like a random info dump about the real father, which I guess like it's nice having info on him because he's literally just a throwaway character. He's there, but like I didn't think that we were gonna get anything on him. So like we find out that like somehow he was in fairy. Like I don't know if he was a fairy, but he couldn't have been a fairy because that means Jude would be part fairy. I don't know. It says, instead of going to college, he found a master swordsmith to take him on as an apprentice. And all I'm thinking is just like, it's not a phase, Mom. Ugh, you don't understand me at all. Quits college to be a swordsmith. At the end of this chapter with Jude and Maddox, this is right after he's talking about like the parents that he killed. It was kind of weird because it read like it was a romantic scene between Jude and some other love interest. And so like without context, you would think that Jude's talking to a lover. That's a big fat yikes. Low-key, Maddox gets more screen time than Carden. And then right after this, I love this, Oriana puts a silver leash on Oak. I am like screaming. Oh my god, I burst out laughing at that part. They're at the ball. Locke comes in and he's all like, dance with me. And Jude's like, oh yeah, let's dance with each other. And then like Carden randomly cuts in and he's like, he's supposed to be drunk and he's like smiling a bunch. And it's just like a really short scene. It's a page and a half. Like I've been saying with all of these other scenes, they're just so short and everything's just summarized. Like what is going on? It's like I'm reading a weird play with just like the scene set up and then the dialogue. It's not good. Jude mentions that she like randomly killed Valerian, who like showed up in the middle of the night in her room. He like climbs in through the window and is like, I'm gonna kill you, you're a lowly human. But then she kills him and then she's like, Ha, Matic, you said that I could never be a murderer. Well, look at me now. I liked that plot line of her killing him. Like, does that make me a sociopath? There's like a vague surpriseness to Carden, nothing else. And then he's like, until we spar again, and then like leaves. And it just like reminds me of that Sailor Moon meme. You didn't do anything, you just smiled and like was drunk. Basically, after this, everything goes to shit at the coronation. Almost every royal fairy dies. The king, currently, he's like, I'm about to die, or like, I'm gonna go live in the wild, so let's crown Dane. And then like, there's a point of like saying that Carden's not up there, and it's like, oh, where is he? He's probably off drunk somewhere. And then Pelican's like, no, I challenge you to a duel. Dane and the father's like, no, you will never be king. It will be Dane. And then Pelican's like, no. Matic comes in and he kills Dane, and it's like, whoa, I thought he was on Dane's side because he's like in with Dane. Everybody's dead except for Pelican and then Carden, who's like nowhere to be seen randomly. Next, Pelican is trying to like force the court poet, whatever that is, to crown him. And this part is like, there's no description, it's summary. Guess whose camera died? So I took like an hour break and got myself some tea. And also sorry for the terrible lighting. For some reason there's like a weird curse thing where like he needs somebody of his like bloodline who's also royal to crown him. Nobody else can do it. They can do it, but it's not going to be official unless somebody of the royal bloodline does it. She conveniently finds Carden after she's... Actually, she doesn't even find him. He finds her because she like hides under the tables and is like trying to like leave without being seen for some reason. Somebody lifts up the tablecloth and it's Carden, but he's like wearing a mask because that's a thing. Jude and Carden are trying to get past like the royal guards, I guess, for some reason. Even though they're outside, they're trying to get into the castle for some reason. And so Jude needs a mask to hide her face. And what does she do? So she goes behind a fairy, right? And she cuts the ribbons and catches the mask before it hits the floor. The fairy turns around, searching for where it fell, but she's already away. It's time for an art lesson, okay? So I'm gonna insert the little drawing that I put in when I read this scene. So she goes up behind this fairy. This fairy's facing away from her, right? She cuts the ribbons. First of all, where does she get the scissors? And normally when somebody's like facing away, this is Jude behind me, right? And the fairy's here. The mask would fall down in front of her. She should not have to turn around to look to see where her mask went. Jude catches it before it falls. So Jude would have to come up behind her and reach down in front of her and grab it and then, you know, scurry off. This does not make sense. This next part of the scene is just like ridiculous, like to top it all off. So Carden and Jude are trying to get past the guards finally. They're like going right up to them and they're like trying to make it an excuse to get inside the castle. And so Jude's trying to come up with an excuse as to why they would need to go in there, and Carden, still with his mask on, he's like, oh, we have this ring, it's official royal business, we need to like inquire about the royals or whatever. Jude's like, oh, that's a nice move, like where did you get that ring? She's like, I have no idea when he took it off his finger. A neat bit of sleight of hand that I had no idea he could do, no less while inebriated. Do you know how easy it is for somebody who has a ring on their finger, right here? Yeah, I have a ring on my finger, see? As we're talking, like I could kind of, you know, like be standing with my hands behind my back and I could literally be like, oh, slip it off my finger, and it's like, oh, we have the ring. It's not rocket science, Jude. The secret lover that Taryn has is Locke. Somebody mentions that Locke is in the room with Matic, like in his office, and he's asking for Taryn's hand in marriage. Oh my god. Like, are you Hans from Frozen? This was messed up though. It's like weird because Taryn knows that Locke and Jude had a thing. Her reasoning for why, like, she didn't say anything was because Locke said it was like a test of love. She had to basically watch her dude woo some other girl, and that was like a test of love. Like, wow, that's true love. And then like Taryn and Jude duel. Like, for some reason Jude goes to the fairy camp to get rulers on her side. This is another thing, like that tampon scene for some reason. So she breaks into this fairy tent, like she just kind of slides under or whatever, and she's like in there. I don't know how she's hiding, if it's like a tent, but there's this fairy dude who's like kind of, you know, high up. She needs his favor, and he's like with his girlfriend there, and they're eating Chinese food. She hears them talking, and then they like open the fortune cookie, and then the girlfriend's like, what does it say? How about the trip you told your girlfriend would be fun, ended in bloodshed, as usual? And then the fairy ruler is like, your shoes will make you happy today. Why is this in here? Is this supposed to be funny? After the additional hazing, Jude and Carden rarely interact. The most that they interact is that they see each other across a certain expanse of space. And that's it. And they like catch each other's eye, and she's like, oh, I hate him. But then, yeah, there's nothing. The next time that they talk is at the Coronation Ball. And they don't really say much either. I laugh at this part because when she's trying to kind of compensate for his being like terrible in the beginning, she was saying when Carden and his friends tried to push her and her sister into the lake, and they were trying to, you know, feed them to the Nixies or whatever. When the Nixie goes toward them, Carden waits until it pauses and leaves so they could get out of the water. Like, wow, that is such a show of affection. He literally watched as it like got closer to her, like, you know, waiting to see if it was gonna eat her or not. And then when it like backed away, he's like, this is boring, I'm gonna leave. And you see that as romantic? None of this excuses his behavior in the beginning, yo. No. Pelican's like, I'm gonna host another ball or whatever. And then Jude and Carden have this plan to like show up together, like hand in hand. And then they have this plan to like overthrow Pelican and then like put Oak on the throne, but then also betray Maddox as well. As they enter it, Jude's like, despite the fact that he is terrible, he is also fun. Wow. Yeah, ripping up those fairy wings. So much fun. Somebody to Jude, when they're kind of having this confrontation with Pelican, this random fairy's like, no offense, but what do you have to do with any of this to Jude? And I'm like, yes, I'm thinking the same thing. So like, remember that plotline, how Jude and Taryn are twins? There's no reason for them to be twins. Like, they could have just been random, you know, normal sisters and stuff. The crown is being thrown around to people and stuff. They throw it to like one of the spies and stuff, and then Jude's supposed to be in like a certain spot and she's not there, and she's like, oh no, the crown is gonna get lost. But then the person throws it to Taryn, and it's like, oh, haha, we thought it was you, twins. And that's literally like the reason why they're twins. Remember when Jude was trying to create an immunity to poison? Maddox is there, and she's like ready to deceive him and stuff. She gets 2 glasses of wine, one for him and one for her. She's trying to like let in the spies so like they can set up the plan. But then Maddox follows her, and he's like, what are you doing? And then she's like, this is the part where we fight. Like, I'm not even joking. I'm not exaggerating. That is an actual line. This is the part where we fight. So they duel in summary form, and then afterwards she, you know, catches him in like the shoulder somewhere, and then he's all, oh, and then she's all, not so feeling good, are you? I poisoned you. And then he's like, but how? The wine, how did you know? Like, which wine? And she's like, I put them in both. And that's literally all that plot line leads up to. Remember that throwaway line in the middle of the book when the bomb was like, you need to earn your name? And then that plot line is pointless, like those stupid code names. And then the last line, I am not joking, is, we finally came up with your name. What else? The Queen. LOL, peace signs. Next. So we've reached the writing portion. And so I had to do the plot and characters first for you to understand what parts in the writing were terrible. Chapter 1 shifts into first person present tense when the prologue was in past tense and it was still from Jude's point of view. So it wasn't omniscient, you know, like where we know everybody's thoughts. Why did we need to change the tense and present and or past tense? To show that time has passed? Onto my receipts. So word choice. Word choice is the weirdest and like has the most clunkiest descriptions and dialogue. So we first have this beauty. My eyes smashed shut. Like, how do you even do that? I imagine myself a witch who hid her heart in her finger and then chopped her finger off. Yeah, there's this random plot point that serves no purpose where Jude's like part of her pinky finger is cut off because some fairy dude like in the past did it or whatever. That's the worst imagery ever, and it doesn't make sense. And I wrote in my notes that it was so bad that it was good, question mark? No, I think I was just really tired when I read it, and I was like, oh, it kind of works, but like, no, it really doesn't. This next one. Jude smooths out a paper on a cunning little table. How is a table cunning? Another use of this word, Tatterfell sews on cunning cuffs made from ... What are cunning cuffs? Like, no. I have read this line so many times and it still doesn't make sense. I actually read this to my dad and he was like, oh, I understand what she's saying. And I'm like, how? Like, I understand what she's trying to say. Is this even correct? She's talking about like her dresses in her closet. And so she says, instead, her dress is on the bed and her closet open, a few gowns hanging roughly, as though she pulled them out before finding them wanting. A few gowns hanging roughly, as though she pulled them out before finding them wanting. So this is an actual line. Maddock is like, let's talk about your behavior tonight because Jude is off doing, you know, what everybody doesn't want her to do. And she's like, let's talk about your behavior at night. Like literally the your is like in all caps. And then another instance of this, when Maddock and Jude are dueling, in the summarized duel, of course, he's like, surrender. And then Jude says, you surrender. Jude still fighting Maddock, and he's all like, why did you do this? And she's like, oh yes, let me tell you my whole plan. You've goaded me right into it. Let's not stall anymore. This is the part where we fight. Oh my god. Like, I am so sorry, Jude. I'm so sorry that those words had to come out of your mouth. There was a lot of overused wording, and I'm not exaggerating one bit. First, there's very common phrases used as weird, like this weird thing, this weird, like, no, too much. And then also a lot of like, I force myself, I make myself. I always see this in the books that are first person present tense, and I have no idea why. Now we have the sighs. So this is like a small thing. There is many times throughout the book, but just this one thing that I caught. 10 pages in, page 10 starts with I sigh, period. And then the top of page 11 also starts with I sigh. And then the snorts. Okay, I didn't count how many snorts there were. I did count some other things, but I didn't count the snorts. Particularly coming from Jude, especially Maddock, and like Carden, I don't know, all of them did that. The wood lines, okay, I do not understand these, like that one with the clothing. I have no idea if this is correct or not. Okay, so, would that Jude was just a bit less clever. Would that Jude was just, oh, and then, would that someone would enchant her to do otherwise? What? So the I take a breath lines. I did count how many of these were in the book. And I didn't start counting this until I was like towards the end of the book. And while I was taking notes, I caught a few here and there, like throughout the rest of the book as well. But if I would have counted, it's unbelievable. Just from like towards the end, I counted 11 I take a breaths. There were like 2 pages having a book open, you know, like this page and then this page. I counted 5 on those 2 pages. The raised eyebrows. I didn't count this until I started copying my notes from the book onto my laptop. And so I didn't count as many. I counted 7. And it's always, the author didn't know how to like describe people's actions. There was just a lot of like, he snorted, or he raised his eyebrows, or she raised one eyebrow. Along with that, I noticed that there was a lot of telling instead of showing. This book is the like holy of holies of telling instead of showing. So normally in books, you would rather read something where instead of saying that someone is uncomfortable, you could be like, he kept fidgeting with his hands and he kept kind of like looking off to the side, or he had like a nervous tic, or you could see his chest like moving up and down like he was breathing very fast. Let's just start on this. My thumb brushes over the missing tip of my ring finger, my nervous tic. Okay, first of all, that like irrelevant mention of her pinky finger, I think it's only mentioned like 2 or 3 times throughout this book. And then also So she's telling us that she has this random habit, and then she doesn't ever do it again throughout the book. The beginning of chapter 6, oh my god, I love this part. I laughed so hard. Okay, but it also like confused me. So she's gone full meta. She's talking to us as if she's aware that there's a story being told. I told the story all wrong. I left them out of the story because I am a coward. Then she's like, so here are 3 things I should have told you about myself before but didn't. And then she lists them off in numbers. Like bullet points, basically. Like, what the heck? Is this like the outline for an essay? This meta moment is the only one in the book. It just goes back to being a regular book. Like, I have no idea why it's in there. After school, I practice with Maddock. He shows me a particularly clever block, and I do it over and over again, better and faster, surprising even him. Again, she like just summarizes it in one sentence, and so we have like no proof that she's a good fighter except for this one word summarizing. And then she like tells us I practiced it over and over instead of like having an actual scene of it happening. Locke and Jude are talking. Jude says something because she like misinterpreted what he said, and it says Locke's eyes widen. I guess that wasn't what he meant. And then he talks explaining what he meant. If you're gonna have dialogue of like he's gonna explain like what he meant by it, you don't need to say I guess that's not what he meant. My cheeks heat, thinking of the way it had felt to wake up with his body stretched out beside mine. You don't even tell us how it felt. So like this is the part when Jude is sleeping over at Locke's house for his party and stuff, but like nothing happens or whatever. And there's literally, it's so implausible that they would be like romantically involved. All we get is just like, we kissed. How did it feel to wake up to him? Thinking of the way it had felt to wake up next to him. Like, tell us what you think. We're inside your head, so like, you know, what's going on? Maddock gives Jude a sword that her real father made. She's like describing it, you know. The only way she describes it is, it's a really, really, really pretty sword. 3 reallys. And that's it. You don't know anything else about the sword. Nothing. And it's like this important sword that her dad made for her. When the royals are all killed, Maddock has a hand in it. Jude is like, he must have allied with Pelican to orchestrate a strike at one time. No one could expect it. Even figured out that the only way not to trigger the crown's death curse was to move when it rested on no one's head. Knowing him as I do, I'm sure he planned this coup. Okay, so like instead of having a real confrontation between her and Maddock where he like somehow reveals this information, she just like assumes it, and then we're like supposed to take her word for it. What I must do is put the puzzle pieces together. Here's what doesn't make sense. Like, is this Dora the Explorer? She literally tells us, like, here's what doesn't make sense, and she just has sentences after sentences about, like, the things that she needs to, like, figure out. There's a lot of contradictions. Just thinking about it makes me fidgety, yet I think about it constantly. This is when she's, like, going under this hill to, like, the court for the first time in the book. She's done it before. She's done it many times before. Literally, it says, I've done it hundreds of times, but I flinch anyway. She's at the revel, and she's like, too many for my eyes to drink them all in, yet I cannot look away. Again at the revel. I know I shouldn't love it, but I love it all the same. She never tells us why she loves it. She tells us that she loves it, but never why. And also doesn't describe any of, like, the physical things about the court. Page 84. I barely dare answer, and yet I must. Page 161. I know he's just trying to make me feel childish when he knows perfectly well why I shouldn't be here. But even though I'm aware of what he's doing, it works. Also, like, such a run-on sentence. I should go over there, but I don't. Like, that's when she's at the coronation and she sees her family and she's like, I should be with them. And she's like, I should go over there, but I don't. If I could find one of the guards, they might take me to the rest of my family. But I don't want to go. I want to do something, but I do nothing. Jude is holding Cardin's ring. I shouldn't have this. Mortal hands shouldn't hold it. Even looking closely seems wrong. Yet I do anyway. Although I don't really want to, I pat down to Taryn's door. Then why do it? Generalizations and abstractions. So at this point, they're talking about the revel. So back to the like no description things, like no describing the important things in this book. So Jude's like, we've watched some very interesting things, but from a distance. She's talking about like in the past. They've seen some interesting things, but from a distance. What things? I don't know, because you didn't tell me. I dally in the palace garden to gather a few more things. You might be wondering, like, a few more things? Like, what did she gather before? Nothing, because it starts out, like, that's the scene. It starts out like we're in the palace gardens, and I gather a few more things. And it's like, what things? Taryn, like 2 lines underneath, she's like, are you allowed to pick those? And you might be wondering, like, what those are. Yeah, it just continues not telling us what those things are. I forget if she's at the school or something, but she's like, then, while I'm feeling stupid, I take out the other things. You remember the some more things from the page before? Then there's more worrying is the way she can't stop staring at things. This is when Jude rescues the human girl, and she's like never seen any of this stuff before because she's basically been a zombie for a very long time. And so when she finally sees, oh god, I just like am hearing my voice right now and I sound so sick. There's many things that could be around, you know, it's fairyland, you know, there's a lot of stuff. No, she just says she can't stop staring at things, and then just continues with the scene. Like, oh man, where is the imagery? What things? Tell me. I want to know. Like, I really want to know. Like, tell me, please. Just to round it out, I thought I would read to you some of my favorite lines throughout this book. This should have been the quote that you see on the back of books. Yeah, this, I smell like pit sweat and sour breath. That is my most favorite line out of this book. It doesn't make me like him any better, but for the first time he seems real. Not good, but real. Me about this book. I mislike everything about this. Spoken by the bomb. Yeah, me about this book again. This one really tested me. This one says, Jude, Taryn says, she's clearly shocked by my behavior. She should be. My behavior is shocking. This is just Jude being Jude. And she's like, buck up, I think. Stop feeling your feelings. IDK man, I wish I couldn't feel my feelings about this book. Oh yeah, this is another good one. This also should have been on the back of the book. This isn't how people show loyalty. This is epic, epic bullshit. Is the writing in this book, like, does it get a free pass because it's directed toward young adult readers? I have no idea why everybody likes this book. Because the writing is not great. The plot isn't that great. There's a lot of plot holes and unnecessary conflict and plot lines. And it's just completely like filler, basically. And half the characters do not need to be there. They're basically just there to drive the plot forward. And I honestly don't know how this book is so popular. The plot was not even that great. The only thing that I was hanging on to while through this book was the possibility of a good relationship, or I guess development of a relationship between Carden and Jude, and just the idea of fairies in general. So I think that's gonna be all for this review. I'm sorry if it was like everywhere or if it was hard to follow. These were just like all of my thoughts from this book. I had way too many thoughts and I tried to compile it down to what I thought was important, and even then it was a lot. Comment down below if you've read this book and what your thoughts are on it. And again, I want to express that this is my opinion. I also post videos every other week. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye! No offense, Kay says, but what do you have anything to do with this?